JoJo's is a nickname given to Jonathan Joestar, the first in a line of people touched by fate. Nice. Joseph, Jotaro, Josuke, Giorno, and Jolyne are the direct descendants of Jonathan in the original timeline, which as of Stone Ocean a year ago now, has been fully animated. A question in the fandom is who the strongest JoJo is, since they all have different powers and personalities. So without further ado, let's decide who we're ranking. I'll be taking Jonathan Joestar, Joseph from Battle Tendency, Jotaro after awakening the world against Dio, Josuke, Giorno after gaining Requiem from the arrow, and Jolyne to see who would win against each other more consistently. This is like a super ultimate contentious topic, so I just want to say this is up for discussion, and me placing one higher is not me personally spitting in your mouth. With that out of the way, let's go! The first topic we need to discuss is whether we can compare the Joestars to each other in an inverse or cross-verse sense, since they come from different periods of times and mostly fight their own enemies. Sort of like Dragon Ball GT versus Dragon Ball Super. However, from roundabout scaling, all Joestars are vaguely relative in speed, because Jonathan fought Dio, who Joseph scales above, then Dio gained Jonathan's body, and stated he was weaker than before, drinks Joseph's blood and surpasses his previous self, losing to Jotaro, with Jotaro scaling to Josuke, and also to Polnareff, who scales to Diavolo, then Bruno to Giorno, as well as Jotaro to Honestly to Pucci to Jolyne. Meaning that while not taking into account strength or abilities, they are all somewhat relative in speed, which mostly just comes from plot convenience. While in a versus battle setting, we can pretty easily go, oh yeah, Goku blitzes Homelander 40 million times in a second. The story needs their characters to be able to fight on par with each other, and with Dio and Jotaro tying all the parts together, it does make rational sense. Jonathan Joestar, the first JoJo, is also the first on this list. His mastery of Hamon was prodigious, and with several other characters' help, he managed to decapitate Dio and force him to spend the next century plotting his revenge. He can use Hamon to walk on water, heal limbs, and destroy vampires, with physical strength vaguely comparable to Dio. He unfortunately is at best as strong as the stand users, but he can't see them and will need to get in close to fight, opening him up for their overwhelming speed or strange abilities. Due to Joseph's fight with Empress in Part 3, we also know Hamon can't interact with stands directly, meaning he has no way to deal meaningful damage to them or get past them to pummel the users. JoJo is unfortunately the weakest. However, I will say he is underrated as far as main JoJos go. Rereading some of Phantom Blood for the Tanjiro vs Dio video made me remember just how kind and cool he is. Josuke Higashikata, the JoJo of Diamond is Unbreakable, is personally my favorite JoJo in the anime, and would simply rush Jonathan if he got close. His restoration ability isn't as useless in a fight as most people think, considering he can rearrange their bodies permanently, like we saw against Angelo. He can literally fuse you into the ground to trap you. On top of this, his use of the environment means depending on the terrain, he can create ranged projectiles by restoring pieces of an object in the trajectory of a target. In terms of stats, we know he scales above Part 4 Jotaro's Star Platinum, as Jotaro needed to use the world to avoid Josuke's stand rush, meaning he would scale a level down from Prime Jotaro, as we don't know how nerfed he is. One method could be turning his seconds of time stop into fractions, meaning the 1/2 second time stop initially is 10% of his prime, and the 2 seconds is 40%, but that's mostly just a number for fun. Joseph Joestar has had 3 outings in Battle Tendency, Stardust, Crusaders, and Diamond is Unbreakable. He's a weird character to cover since his prime at the end of Part 2 has different stats and abilities than his stand user self in Part 3. I do think Part 3 is weaker, and would be somewhat debatable with Jonathan, but his Part 2 self greatly outscales Jonathan, as Strizo is stated to surpass Dio, with Joseph putting up a better fight against him than Santana. Santana referred to as a dog by the other Pillarmen, who Joseph could fight on par with by the time he fights Wamu. This means going by a scaling chain, he's 3 power jumps above Jonathan, whereas Prime Jotaro would only be 2 jumps, meaning his physical strength and speed likely match or somewhat surpass the likes of Jotaro, but not to an extent I think he blitzes. On top of this, Joseph has his clackers for the range advantage and to create difficult to anticipate attacks. However, he is likely durable enough to chat through a stand rush, and with the damage and restoration effects, he could likely heal himself with Hamon, as he's even better Hamon master than Jonathan, who outscales Zappelli, who can heal a broken arm in a matter of seconds. From there, he can simply rush Josuke himself, but I do think it's up for discussion, meaning Joseph and Josuke are more relative than Josuke and Jonathan. Jolyne Kujo, the final JoJo as of the Stone Ocean timeline, is in all likelihood the weakest JoJo physically, as she doesn't end up getting to scale to her main villain's strongest form, but does instead consistently use her stand in the most clever and fun ways out of all the JoJos. She was able to swap with Seamoon, who was above the likes of Honestly, Honestly's reactions being on par with Jotaro, and combined with her string, I think she can handle Josuke and Joseph due to countering them. We know from her maintained use of the Mobius strip, she can prevent her organs from being inverted by Seamoon's gravity, which means it can prevent the effects of a stand from happening by converting the body that would be affected to string, meaning her mastery over her own body string manipulation would negate restoration. And this is where her other ability comes in. The ability to use rope to slice and choke the enemy, which when combined with Stonefree's ability to partially manifest itself to allow Jolyne's body more versatility, makes me think she can avoid any lethal blow by Josuke and choke the both of them, which would negate Joseph's regeneration as breathing is required for Hamon use. Combined with her having a power type stand when fully manifested, and I don't think Josuke is just nagging her physically. It is a contest, one I think she wins because of the way it interacts with Jolyne's body. Jotaro Kujo, the JoJo appearing in every part of the original timeline since his introduction, is the one everyone has been scaling down to or above so far. In the case of Josuke and Jolyne while he was rusty from not using his abilities, and in Joseph's case, his prime during the fight against Dio, where he beat a Dio stronger than the one Jonathan fought. Since Jotaro has time stop in all of his parts, I just don't think anyone so far can touch him with it, which is certainly very underwhelming. But to go over it, I think Part 3 Jotaro before he learned time stop would likely go below Josuke. As we know, Josuke was relative to his Part 4 state, who was vaguely weaker than his prime, just like Part 3 Jotaro before he learned time stop. But unlike him, Josuke has an offensive ability to use on Star Platinum. As for Jotaro, I do think Diamond is Unbreakable is his weakest incarnation, followed by Stone Ocean, since his body atrophied temporarily after Pucci extracted his disc. Then Stardust Crusaders Jotaro, as he has the max length of time stop and is at the height of his physical power. Giorno Giovanna is the bastard son of Dio while he had Jonathan's body. However, he proved in Golden Wind that his heart is that of a Joestar. In the part, he underwent two different evolutions, one against Babyface and the other against Diavolo, so we'll go over Gold Experience first. Golden Experience is a uniquely never referred to as a power type stand, meaning only his speed is decent as he could fight Bruno who could fight Diavolo, who was able to escape Silver Chariot's attack even without time skip. With his ability to activate the life energy someone has, he only needs one attack to give himself an incredible speed advantage, and with his ability to imbue life into objects can reflect damage from incoming attacks. Meaning I actually think he would likely be right below Jotaro and defeat Jolyne, Joseph, and Josuke at their best, as he essentially nerfs someone else's speed and redirects their damage. However, this ability is not why Giorno is so widely recognized as the strongest stand user in the anime of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, as he attained a Requiem stand during the final battle against Diavolo, granting him an ability no one can overcome. It's been called Absolute Zero or Nullification depending on the translation, but what matters is the effect it has. Anything trying to harm Giorno or Gold Experience Requiem will have their cause negated, meaning they will never be able to have any effect. We also know this works during Diavolo's time skip, which is an ability that can change fate and erase time, which gets us into time skip versus time stop, the age-old debate. But the reason I believe Requiem can overcome the world is due to Requiem moving inside of time skip, not after. The time is erased, which means Requiem could move in time that didn't exist, whereas time stop still interacts with time, as the effects built up inside of it are unleashed when it resumes. Meaning Requiem would either unpause Jotaro's time skip or negate the damage it causes, and then attack Jotaro in his interval. Another point strengthening Requiem over the world is that, put simply, the world is still bound by time, considering it has a duration of a half a second to 10 seconds, which would put it in a similar level of affecting time as King Crimson, meaning since King Crimson can be overwhelmed even inside those erased moments, the world can likely be causally negated inside those few seconds. I do think the world versus Requiem is more debatable than people say, but I do ultimately think Giorno would win. If you disagree on the placements, which I know you do, comment why in your ranking. If you made your own video on the topic, tell me so I can react to it on stream. Like Buccialetti said, Arrivederci.